So, Mikey, just to give a little smoke up your bum, I absolutely adore you. I've had the privilege of working with you before, and your cultural mind is just, it's fascinating. And I love working with you, not only because of your professional acumen, but who you are as a person, and you genuinely operate from the heart and you're not afraid to say so. So thank you for the capacity of which I know you as a friend and as a colleague. I called upon your brain to really get some insight into how we can change the scope of this change and uncertainty that we are feeling. And I thought I'd labour on, or ask you to labour on, some cultural perspective or strategies to how people can actually thrive on the other side of this period. So, yeah, share your brain with us, Mikey, please.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. And I want to acknowledge you for what you're creating here and what you've done in the last few months and in the last couple of weeks in terms of creating what you've created. I had a look at your website last night, and it's amazing. You are an example of what can happen when people are faced with uncertainty and disruption, and see it as an opportunity as opposed to a setback. And so I want to acknowledge you for what it is that you've created as a result of this circumstance that we're all in. I guess I want to start by saying I don't know. And we don't know, and we aren't supposed to know. I've said the word unprecedented heaps over the last few days, and you're going to hear it heaps. The fact is, it is, and it's one. This is one of those experiences that is truly unprecedented. It's not to say that humans haven't gone through massive and widespread disruption over the years, but this is not something we've experienced in our lifetime. So I think I'm really cautious about saying what people should or shouldn't do because there's a lot of that happening at the moment, and I don't think it's helpful unless you are an expert and unless the advice you're providing is of direct relevance to whoever you're sharing that advice with. So I think that's the first thing for me to acknowledge is I don't know. But what I do know is that I do have some insight to how people work, how humans behave and how humans respond. And I think if there's anything to add to this conversation at this point of time, it's an awareness of what we do and what we need as human beings. And that's a culture. We talk about culture. That's a cultural thing as a community, as a society, family, in relationships, any place where you've got more than one person. Two people, it's a relationship. Three people and more, it becomes a culture. And so there's different applications for culture, different ways in which we can talk about it. But if we think about it generally, we're faced with this massive shift in how we are living and working, not just working, but how we're living. And so I think what we need to do at this time is just come back to fundamentals, come back to the fundamentals of human nature and human behavior, and to understand what those needs are. I think that for me is that's all I'm particularly concerned about at the moment, because we are at a time experiencing something that is bringing us back to really core, fundamental, raw, primal behavior. And so it's interesting. I think it's a time where people need to walk the talk. There's a lot of experts and leaders who talk about leading groups, leading teams, leading themselves in terms of cut to what is really important at the moment, and that's understanding our fundamental needs for safety, security, belonging, connection, and significance, and love. These are fundamental needs, and what people are doing is having them met one way or another. Some are really destructive, some are constructive. So we just need to know what that is for ourselves. We need to know what that is for people that we care for and work with and are in relationships and friendships and families with. So it's understanding those needs and doing whatever we need to do to meet them in a way that is empathetic and kind and compassionate, and with a universal perspective in mind. It's not about us as individuals anymore. It's about we as a global community. So they're the things that I'd be focusing on now, regardless of your context, whether it's at home, in families, or in a workplace, whatever that looks like. Could be an overgrown backyard.
Yeah, exactly, in friendly Melbourne. So can I just play devil's advocate there? And you and I think on the same wavelength, and I absolutely agree. Can you imagine speaking to somebody at the moment who doesn't really understand or resonate with the concept of just loving harder and, really drilling down to the basics and the fundamentals of how humans operate? What could be some really clear, specific means tomorrow to instill in your team that you could take away and create change and have better leadership or culture or lead from the heart? Imagine you're dealing with a business that's, a family generational business that's been operating for 65 years, and they're in a trade, and they see what you're saying, and they like the concept, and they do believe in essence that is a benefit to operating in business like this. But how could they constructively, start to move towards instigating that in their workplace or in their team?
You've got to start where you're at. That's the most important thing. You've got to start where you're at. And the only way you're going to know when I say where you're at, where everybody in your team is at, the only way to do that is to ask them.